This year is like a January of scrumptious, beautiful fantasy, amazing releases, and it kind of got even better when I read my 5th book of the year, which was The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, and it was so good. It did not disappoint. If you saw my tweet as soon as I finished it, I said that for once, apart from being absolutely enthralled in another fairy land, for once the lead character was not awesomely predictable as they usually are in Fae Kingdoms. But I mean, I don't usually mind that because I love a bit of romance, but this was like more than that. It was like another level to that, another dimension other than just the Fae dimension. So I will start talking about the book as I usually do, and then I'm going to do a bit of a spoiler element at the end, but I will let you know when the spoiler's going to start. So this is completely spoiler-free. Enjoy. Our lead character in The Cruel Prince is Jude. Jude is a bit of a feisty one. She is not your typical, like, roll over and save me prince. She is a little bit feisty and a little bit frustrating at times, I'm not gonna lie. As much as I loved the book and it got like 4.5 stars for me, there was frustrations with Jude's character in a good way that I think is gonna unravel itself across the trilogy. So if you didn't know, The Cruel Prince is going to be the first book in a 3-part series called the Folk and Air Trilogy, which, what a good name! And I can't actually guess what the air bit comes from yet, which is quite exciting considering I've finished the first book. This book is mainly set in the fairy realm. As you probably guessed, this is a fae novel. I haven't read anything else by Holly Black, so although I know that this is part of a wider world which is used before, I can't really comment on that, I'm afraid. So maybe recommend me some of her titles which also use this world and then I'll comment on them, but I'm just gonna comment on the world as I see it, because that's all I can do. Anyway, what's particularly nice is that this doesn't just feature the Fae realm, so there are elements of the human world. For one, the book starts in the human world, and this was a little bit of an issue for me, and if I was judging this book on the first 10 to 20 pages, I kind of felt a little bit sad because there was like mentions of modern technologies, there was mentions of Vivi, for example. The first time you meet our lead protagonist Jude's sister, Vivi, she is watching the telly and she's engrossed and she's going. So I was a little bit disappointed because I don't want that in my fairy world. I usually quite like a little bit of medievalness, you know? I really liked Everless because of that medieval aspect. So the idea of now jumping into the modern day made me go a little bit, oh. However, this very quickly goes from the human realm into the Fae realm. So the modern day that we are currently in this book is all set in the Fae realm, and this isn't really a spoiler because you find out within the first chapter, but for the first chapter we are in the past, and it's when Jude, Taryn, who is Jude's twin, and Vivi, their other sister, they all become orphans-ish because Maddock, a high Fae god, comes into the human realm, finds their mother, who used to be his wife, go figure. But Maddock comes and kills their mum and their dad, which kind of sucks, and he scurries them away to the Fae realm. It turns out, however, that Maddock is actually Vivi's father. Vivi is high Fae, and Taryn and Jude are pretty plain and human. Sucks to be them. So Vivi is growing up in what really is supposed to be her real world. Taryn and Jude get to live in the Fae world even though they're not technically Maddock's children. Not because Maddock's a really good guy, but because Maddock is very strict on being a good man. So he is, you know, he takes in the kids because, you know, he killed their mum. It's what a good guy would do. Except for the killing and the blood and the... So when we cut to where the book really gets going, and this is the current day, the girls are circa, I'm gonna say I think around 15, 14, I can't really remember, maybe 16, but it's been 10 years since they were taken, and Vivi, although she is actually high Fae, don't much love it because she obviously spent like 7 years of her life growing up in the real world, or the human world. However, Taryn and Jude seem to like it a lot more. Jude, however, is really, really battling with herself. She's like split between hating the fact that the Fae really look down on the humans and they manipulate them and they use their powers on them and they're just considered lowly to the point where you don't really notice them walking past you. Humans are the dirt. So Jude really struggles with that, but she also struggles with the fact that she also kind of admires them, and if you really get down to the heart of it, what she really wants is to be one of them, and she hates the fact that she isn't, and her sister Vivi is, even the way down to the fact that she has the bended, curvy ears and Vivi has the pointy ears. It all comes down to jealousy, but this has driven Jude to want to become more than her Fae counterparts. She wants to become more than her classmates and better than them, so that they will respect her, probably not realising that the Fae maybe never will respect her, although I'm assuming by the end of the 3 books they may do. Anyway, so Taryn and Jude go to school with all the other children of the High Fae court, and that includes the princes. So you have Prince Cardan, who is around Jude's age, and then the other important one of those friends, you have Narcissa, one of the girls, but then more importantly you have Locke. I'm not going to go into how they become really important across the book because that would be spoilers for you. However, I am going to touch on Cardan because Cardan is making Jude and Taryn's life pretty much hell. He bullies them, he treats them really horribly, and he is very cruel to them, hence the title The Cruel Prince. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. It's a really, really good read, and if you've never read anything to do with Fae before and the Fae, you need to know a couple of things about them. So most importantly, they can't lie, so everything they say has to be the truth, which makes them sound really good, no? Like, how amazing, they can't lie. Not true! Not true, because they can be tricksy, and that's the beautiful thing. That's one of the reasons that I love the Fae. They're so clever with their words so that they can say something that is both true but also not true and manipulates your brain, and it's so clever and I love it. But then the other thing that you really need to know about them, well, one of the other things, they're beautiful, like stunningly beautiful, like you just go. And the third thing that you really need to know is that they live forever, pretty much. So they have really super long lives. You also get very limited children in the Fae world. They could have a child like once every century. So they have to have humans in the Fae world to keep the population going, really. So you have a lot of like part human, part Fae children. Anyway. I'm going to go into spoilers now because because it's only the first book in the series, there isn't a lot I can say without spoiling it for you, and I really don't want to spoil it for you. I want you to discover these books for the first time yourself, and then let's catch up on the second book, you know? That'd be great. And then the third one, and we can do a whole big shebangy wrap up. Anyway, cut into spoilers, so scootle off now if you haven't read The Cruel Prince. Ready? Cool. One of the things that I really loved about this book, and I'm hoping you did too, was the pool. You know, the pool that whenever Jude is coming back from school and she looks into the pool and you can see a face looking back at you that isn't your own face, and it's someone's face who's looked into the pool before. Yeah? You know what I'm talking about? I'm not sure how else to describe it. I really loved that element of the book. I thought it was really nice, and it leaves lots open for the next few books. So for example, I could imagine like a murder happening in front of that pool and then the murder showing up for someone else and spoiling something later, you know, especially now that Jude is a spy, or not really a spy anymore, but was a spy and knows spy techniques, and I'm assuming she's going to continue being a bit of a spy. I like spies. I was also really interested in this whole Cardan thing because yes, it was kind of obvious that Cardan hated her because he loved her, and that did annoy me a little bit because I don't like this whole thing of boys are mean to you, which means that they love you. I always thought that that was a really bad message for people to be bringing to the world. I think it's an awful message to tell kids, so I don't love the fact that Holly Black has used this trope within the book because that's not a positive message. However, this book is not aimed at 10-year-olds, so it's probably fine. I liked the fact that we didn't get that moment where Cardan and Jude first kissed. I really like the fact that they didn't automatically just become together. They're both struggling with hating things. So for example, Cardan hating the fact that he is like falling in love with, or not. So, okay, correction here. I kind of like that Cardan also has someone he obviously loves, as well as Jude, who he has an attraction towards. And I'm assuming that turns from attraction to love later in the series, but Or maybe it doesn't. But the fact is, it's really nice that we didn't go from I hate you to I love you immediately. They went from one kiss and they realised that there was some kind of spark there, but they both kind of hate it, so they're fighting it. But then I also like the fact that you have Nicasia, who Cardan obviously loves, and there's this like back history of, and it would be so much easier for him to be with her, and you don't know what's going to happen, and I quite like that. It would have been so easy for Holly to just make this exciting love scene at the end, and she didn't, so that's kind of nice, and it leaves a little bit more until sort of the next book. Equally, I hate Taryn, like, hate Taryn. She is an awful twin. Everything she did was useless, and I think everything about her is kind of useless, and Locke is intriguing, and I get that he likes stories to play out, but it annoys me that there is this character that is Taryn who just plays down to him and is like, oh, I want to be married into the Fane world so much that I'll just marry the first boy that comes along. Oh, really, really got to me. And everything that she did or said got to me and bugged me, and that there's nothing about her that I like, in fact. And Jude, although I like her as a character and I think she's perfect for the book, there were times that I didn't like her. So she is kind of evil, but not, she's kind of really power thirsty. The fact that she ends the first book sitting on the throne is obviously really symbolic of that, and that was obviously deliberate of Holly, and I'm assuming she goes power mad. But then again, I just read the Grisha trilogy, and our lead in that is also quite power hungry at times, so I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I quite like it, but also I think that maybe you're supposed to be torn on whether you like her or not sometimes. She isn't all great, and I don't know, do I like that, do I not? It obviously kept me reading. I mean, I read this book in about a day, so yeah, kind of in two minds. I like to not like her sometimes. In regards to the next book, I'm not sure what I hope is going to happen. I kind of hope that Cardan, I kind of want to see how Jude and Cardan's relationship evolves, because I do feel like this was a bit short on the whole romancy love affair thing. I do wish there'd been a bit more of that within the book, and generally I just hope that the next book is a bit bulkier, you know? We get a bit more building, we get a little bit more time to discover the little journeys and paths that the book is going on, because each, although it was fast-paced and things were happening all the time, I don't feel like we had enough time to really explore elements. So for example, Roach and the Ghost, we could have known so much more about them. We could have had little side excerpts about missions that they were going on. We could have heard more about Jude's struggle with the training, for example. We could have gone on a little journey about the poisons that she was taking in every day, and I get that that wasn't integral to the plot. However, it was kind of integral because that's how Jude ended up poisoning Maddox at the end, because she was so used to poisons. It's a tricky one for me. I quite often say that I hope books are going to be a little bit longer, and I think no more so true than for this book, because it was only 370 pages and the writing was quite big, so it probably could have been condensed down to like 250, who knows. Either way, I gave this book 4.5 stars out of 5. However, that has a big caveat against it, and that is that we get more description in the second book in the series. Otherwise, I'm kind of tempted to mark it down. And I know I shouldn't mark books in that way. However, I was thinking about this, and I marked the Grisha books up on the final book because I read all 3 in like 4 days. So if I'd have read the final book on its own, maybe a year after the second one came out, I would have marked it down, down, down. So I'm assuming some of my unanswered questions, which will make me want to give this like 5 stars, are going to be answered. So my star rating may change, if that makes sense. Am I making sense? I'm 20 minutes into this video. Dear God, I should be quiet. That's ridiculous. I am waffling. I will see you all next week. Bye.